Hello, everyone. Welcome to a session here this morning. My name is Chris McClanahan. As you can see, I'm the Director of Technical Product Management for Tanzu Hub, which we're going to talk to. You're probably like, I don't even know what that is, but you're going to know before you leave today. And with me is...
Lucas Paratori, Product Manager at CloudHealth, right now called CloudHealth. And yeah, I work with Chris. Excited to be here with you guys as well.
Absolutely. So we're going to ask a couple questions too throughout this and you know, try to get you guys engaged.
Keep you active. It's early in the morning.
Jacks, you know, and those kind of things. So, and with that, we're going to talk a couple things, challenges around cloud adoption and kind of see if it aligns with what you guys are experiencing right now. Our new kind of mode of operation from the VMware Tanzu portfolio. We're going to talk around the portfolio as well and dive into what's called the Tanzu Intelligence Services. And then really kind of dive into cost optimization and really the meat of, you know, what CloudHealth provides to the big storyline around that develop, operate, and optimize side of things. So let's get started. One of the things, you know, every company needs to act like a software company. And it doesn't really matter what industry you're in or anything like that. It really boils down to how well your software and your consumers can interact with the software, or you know, that assembly line and how efficient it is and running the machinery and things like that. It's all driven around the software side of things. And obviously the agility on how you deliver that software is really an important side of it. And so, you know, there's these levels that companies have to achieve in order to be really world-class development companies, right? Traditional, they deliver, you know, 1 to 4 times a year. And when you start to kind of really get into that agility delivery mentality, then you start to get into those 10 to 50 times a year releasing software. And then the world-class companies that are just killing it are doing 14 to 18,000 deployments a year. And so I know, you know, Lucas, we've kind of gone through some of this transition ourselves at VMware. For everyone that, you know, knows VMware, it was very much an on-premises style company. We were definitely in that traditional side of things. You know, obviously we've gone through a transition, and I'll talk about that a little bit more, but from the CloudHealth side, you guys really were born in the cloud, right? And so you guys kind of skipped some of the traditional side and kind of more into that leading side of that. So what do you have to say?
Yeah, exactly. And we're still going through that journey. So our entire application was built on Classic. This was something that we were deploying 1 to 5 times a day, which was great, but we were still holding engineers back. And we're in a transition right now into our NG, next gen platform, which we're actually deploying 20 to 30 times per day. And engineers have the ability and autonomy to ship this code themselves. They're not waiting on some sort of DevOps manager to be able to approve, hit the deploy button. So this is actually a journey that we've really, and for me as a PM, I'm very excited about being able to ship out features faster, not waiting on those waterfall type timelines.
Yeah, and when VMware acquired CloudHealth, it was funny. I was kind of getting involved and just kind of understanding how they deployed things, and I saw even doing 5 and 10, you know, deployments a day into production. I like laughed because I was like, we are never going to be able to do that. But we have started to go down that path and for our SaaS solutions, and we're probably in that, you know, 10 to 20 deployments per week through the pipelines. Developers can push whatever they want, and that really is, and our goal is to be in that world-class you know, category where, you know, we're just pushing code, and I as a product manager want to just try to be able to keep up with the releases from my developers, right? And that's really the challenge that we're trying to solve with this new venture around the new Tanzu portfolio.
And wait, maybe for the crowd, who's in the traditional 1 to 4? Anybody in the 10 to 50? Hand raise? Yeah, that range. Anybody shipping 4,000 times a day? Working on it. Somebody over there. Get back to work.
Yeah. So a survey that we did was really around where things are going in the industry, right? And migrating apps to the cloud obviously has been an ongoing theme for several years now. More use of Kubernetes and containers is up 72%. open source is just exploded, right? The utilization of open source across every vertical of industry is just going crazy. Multiple clouds, and then obviously start this huge push of AI, ML, and bringing in this ease of deployment. And that's really one of the things too, is introducing AI into the development process is really going to start pushing people into that multiple deployments per day, per week, et cetera. So some of the challenges that come with this are, obviously, and we'll kind of build this out a little bit, is, how do I scale Kubernetes environments without downtime and upgrade? I think upgrades are probably the biggest challenge that you have when you're managing a fleet of Kubernetes environments. How do I improve developer productivity? How do I optimize all this, the cost, security? When you're pushing things through the pipeline so quickly and so many people are doing it at one time, you've got to have a good handle on what's going on from a cost perspective, absolutely, but also from that security side of things. And so with that, there's just a ton of process, right? Whether it's migrating something or, again, it's refactoring or, I need the capacity management of things, secrets management, you name it. There's just a ton of processes and a ton of tools that go with it, right? And so there's a new approach that we're kind of building our portfolio around from a VMware perspective or Tanzu perspective around this develop, operate, and optimize, and bundling these processes into these 3 different types or actions, right? And from a development perspective, it's really giving developers this golden path to production. And when I say that, what I mean by that is really, like, I don't want developers spending any mind share on building something or having to manage some capacity thing or anything like that. I want them, honestly, writing code, dropping it into a repo, and then letting the supply chain take care of the rest of it. And I know that on the other end of it, it's going to come out a consistent delivery model, right? And that's really what we mean by that develop golden path to production. Operate and optimize, again, this is keeping things up to date, making sure I'm using the latest runtimes of particular services, all of those things, policy driven. Again, I don't want really developers worrying about that stuff. I want them pushing code out as fast as possible. And then obviously the day 2, everybody's all, really that day 0 is the develop and operate side of things, and the optimize is that day 1 through ever, right? And so we got to do this across a common platform. Right? And so we showed you all the tools and everything, and it's all scattered all over the place. Well, it's got to sit on a common platform and a common data model, so that way that you can have a consistent, I want fruit to go on one side and the pie to come out the other side, but it tastes the same way every time that it comes out, right? And that's really what we're delivering with the new Tanzu portfolio.
And one of the big opportunities that we have too with that, especially for us at CloudHealth, is so much of FinOps is reactive. You launch resources, then you right-size it, you buy RIs. But you're not actually architecting and thinking about cost. Engineers aren't thinking about that at time of deployment. So the more that CloudHealth can connect to that upstream pre-deployment mindset, the more that they can help coach and we can help train engineers to take the right actions before they actually take them instead of correcting them after.
Yep. Absolutely, and this really starts to build this kind of closed loop model, right? And quit being as reactive and start to understand the patterns that are going through the tool chains and supply chains and the development lifecycle. So that way, as things are being optimized, we're already building that optimization into the next development cycle of code that's going through the pipeline, right? And that's really where the VMware Tanzu portfolio is building and putting all of our investment in, right? And so one of the things I want to make sure that's really clear is that Tanzu does not just equal Kubernetes in the new world, right? And so obviously VMware and Broadcom and all these things have been all over the news if you follow it at all. But the Tanzu portfolio is expanded to really represent this develop, operate, and optimize portfolio of multi-cloud management. How many people are using more than one public cloud? Pretty much everybody, right? And this is just really the factor that's in play nowadays. It's, where's the cheapest? Where's the closest to the consumer? These are the things that, obviously as businesses are developing solutions for customers are depending on a lot of the people in this room to put it in the right place, make sure it's optimized, and then obviously give us that closed loop cycle. So with that, obviously, we're going to dive into what is the portfolio. If you've kind of been in any other sessions, there's a Tanzu application platform, and that's really that develop and operate side. That's that golden path to production. How do I manage my Kubernetes fleet? How do I, efficiently deploy Spring Boot applications and those kind of things? And then there's the intelligence service side, when that's the optimization side. And that's really what we're going to kind of dive into here over the next few minutes. And there's solutions that are kind of the puzzle pieces that make up the intelligence services, Transformer, Guardrails, Insights, CloudHealth. But the big key on this is there's a underlying platform, right? If you've, again, been around VMware, we had a lot of great singular solutions, CloudHealth being one of those great solutions, right? The former Tanzu, or what we call classic Tanzu, Kubernetes management was a great solution. But they all were individual. What we've done here is now put this on top of a common platform and common data model called Tanzu Hub. So what is Tanzu Hub? So basically, Tanzu Hub is we got a lot of special sauce in it, I guess, but imagine it as a common inventory / data model that every one of our services then relies on to present information around the assets that are deployed within the multiple cloud environments. And when I say multiple clouds, it's all the public clouds as well as on-premises data centers as well. We take that inventory, we know where it's running, and then we can decorate that and start to build relationships. And so blast radiuses. If I know something goes, if this particular machine or service goes down, these are the things that are associated to it. It also couples in applications, and we do predictive analytics on, hey, these 5 things talk to each other on a regular basis. Those are probably an application. We'll present it to you as a potential application, and then you can then curate it to add other resources into it, create rules that say, hey, if this scales up, add it to the topology of the application, and then we can then start to decorate that group of entities or resources with cost, security, and different characteristics that then you can start to optimize and manage the environment.
And then, into Transformer. So this is something that CloudHealth, when we first launched, we had a feature around this, a migration assessment. What does your workload look like running on-prem? This is what it would look like to run in multiple clouds. And as the market's matured, as companies start to say, you know what, I'm running in AWS, maybe I want to run it in Azure. I'm not saying that would ever happen, but AWS, maybe move it back to on-prem. So we released a feature called Transformer in this suite that helps you do this what-if analysis. What would it be like to run this application in this cloud? What if I modernized it, not just doing a lift and shift? So this was an area that CloudHealth really lived and breathed for a long time, pre-Transformer, and we just couldn't keep up with the demand, and we have really made some big investments in this new product to be able to give a better what-if analysis of running on cloud or on-prem.
Yeah, and migration, and I use the term loosely because most people don't when we go and, hey, here's this application, push this button and move it somewhere. I'm sure you guys are super comfortable with doing that, right? I wouldn't be. So it's more of recommendations, as Lucas said, and that's becoming more of a business practice. Migrating and knowing, or hey, I'm gonna go build a new instance of this in one of the other clouds is absolutely something that's used to be like, hey, we're gonna move to cloud, check the box, we moved these 5 things over there, we did it, yay, OKR met. Right? Now it's, hey, no, we really need to think about moving this over into the, APJ district because that's where we're seeing the most increase in revenue and things like that. So Transformer is absolutely a core part of, I think, business process going forward.
And then Guardrails, that's another one for us that really excited for CloudHealth to be a part of this product suite. And this is drift detection, being able to be alerted if you have accounts going out of a certain state, if you have resources, EC2 instances that have a public, an IP address open to public. These are the types of checks you can start to build in. And what's really powerful with Guardrails is it supports a policy as code language as well. So you're no longer just kind of drag and dropping the typical CloudHealth policy experience you were used to. We now are able to leverage the flexibility flexibility of having a policy as code language. We're also able to leverage that graph in the hub, so we're able to see the relationships between these resources. So you identify an instance that's connected to another instance. Now you have that opportunity to be able to attack instance B through instance A. And guardrails is one of those features that helps you identify those types of vulnerabilities.
Yeah, and it's part of that, it's going in on one side and it's coming out consistent on the other. These are the things in the middle that are making sure that the policy hasn't changed, somebody hasn't gone in and done something stupid, because it happens. I know, sometimes they give me the keys and I do stupid stuff.
Can't trust PMs with keys.
Yeah, exactly. And so guardrails is a great solution. Another part of the intelligence services is insights. And this is around event detection and aggregation and anomaly detection, right? And so you've got events coming from everywhere. It doesn't matter, a single EC2 instance can trigger, 10,000 events in like 10 minutes, right? It's a crazy amount, but a lot of that stuff is just noise, right? And so what Insights does is takes things like guardrails, drifts, right, or different things coming from, let's say, CloudWatch and whatnot, starts to aggregate those together and then can tell you, hey, you know what, here's where we started to see this increase in events around this asset, and we trigger it back to, oh, somebody did a policy change that started this thing to run amok, right? And so really the insights is kind of that layer on top that's saying, hey, you've created all these policies with guardrails, you've got cost policies and things like that, and then all of this information is being fed into the AI ML engine underneath the covers of insights, and then starting to give you in true time what is going on at that instance, and then lets you kind of rewind the clock back to see when the thing started to happen, and really the root cause analysis of what really the problem is. Because most of the time, the problem that you're experiencing has nothing to do with what actually caused it down, backstream, right? And so this is what's going to help you get to that root cause. Obviously fix it at the moment, but then fix it permanently going forward. And then obviously, CloudHealth. All right, if you've been around, the cost FinOps world at all, then you know about CloudHealth, right? And it does really, all of the asset-related cost, and then rolling that up into groups, right? And so when we were talking about the hub and building applications and, showing those potential applications through our AI and ML feature. This is where then you can start then associating the cost to those groups of entities that we've collected through the inventory across multiple clouds. And now you can even do costs across the multiple clouds at that application-centric viewpoint, right? And so you can do a lot of, breakdown. And what I find, and I guess Lucas, correct me if I'm wrong, platform engineering and those teams I find are the ones that are probably the biggest consumers of CloudHealth and the cost side versus just the financial operations people.
For sure. I mean, it's kind of split between the doers and the people that are charging the doers.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'd say probably about a 50-50 split between those finance versus the actual engineer, DevOps-y type of people that are the ones deploying the code and responsible for the resources.
And so that kind of goes back to that loop, right? And in that develop, operate, and optimize cycle that we're kind of developing against from our Tanzu portfolio, the intelligence services is what we collect all of the inventory that you have across the multiple clouds, right, and your on-premises environments. Then we can start to decorate that with event information. We can decorate it with cost information. We can decorate it with, drifts from a configuration perspective. And this is giving you the capability to manage millions of assets across your environment. And I'll give you from our central IT from VMware, they use our intelligence services and the hub and the whole portfolio kind of in a dog fooding perspective. And we have as of yesterday, we have 84 million assets under management in a single instance of the intelligence services. That's a ton, right? And it's over 2,000 AWS accounts. I think we have, it's like 5,000 AWS accounts, 2,000 Azure accounts, another couple thousand GCP accounts. Across all of that landscape, we're managing those assets in our own environment. So the scale is there, and obviously the capabilities to be able to manage such a vast fleet of assets.
And one of the things, too, that's just really difficult, if you're familiar with the FinOps Foundation, they release their State of the Cloud every year, and companies are using the average company is using 4+ FinOps tools, or tools to help manage their cloud costs. So one of the things that I'm also really excited about the hub and that challenge is this aggregation of these products into one specific suite and one single experience to log into.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to hand it over to Lucas. We're going to really dive into this cost optimization, because I do feel probably the number one, when you're talking about optimization, cost, if cost isn't top of mind, then you're going to get bit in the end. And we've felt this before. When we started going into our SaaS journey at VMware, we were like, everybody just deploy what you want. We had, at one point, 18,000 AWS accounts. And so luckily we've kind of shrunk that back down to about 5,000 right now, but the only way we were able to do that is because we actually acquired CloudHealth and started using that to optimize the environments that we have and start to understand our cost overruns, which we had a lot of, and things like that. So Lucas, I'll hand it over to you. And
yeah, you also just hinted at some of the things I'm going to be talking about is how hard it is as an enterprise to navigate acquisitions, especially with public cloud, depending on how you use the cloud, how you charge back the cloud. This is an area that really gets difficult as you go through acquisitions. So I'm going to be clicking into that. First button click, yep, hit the right one. So there's really 3 main challenges that we can bucket enterprises going into. The first is around access and permission. So this could be as simple as making sure that I can only see the data that I have permission to see, or it could be even more granular as I don't have the ability to take action against data unless I should have ownership of it. I'll go into that a little bit later. There's also showback and chargeback. So depending on the organization and what level of maturity you're in, maybe you perform just showback. Engineers know what they're spending, but they're not actually taking out of their profit center to be able to charge back.
I'm going to ask a question. Who's doing actual chargeback? A few? All right. Who's doing just showback? Who's doing nothing? What? Right?
Engineers would love to join that company.
Yeah, I'm going to find out where you work so I can come in. But no, but I think that, as you said, this is a maturity thing, right? That you have to kind of build into. Chargeback, I've worked with several companies, and I think one of them we actually got to chargeback. It was just getting to showback's a monumental feat, I think.
Absolutely. But yeah, and then lastly, it's managing commitment-based discounts. For us at VMware, we manage reserved instances centrally. We have a cloud business office. And if an engineer wants to launch a new application, they work with that cloud business office to be able to have them plan for new usage. Because if a new application spun up, reserved instance savings plans aren't purchased or planned to support that, then costs are going to be greater than they should be. So this is an area that, depending on the organization, different organizations centrally or decentrally managed. So especially through an acquisition, this is a really interesting area that could have an issue. So drilling into these, so access and permissions. So this really goes back to this kind of 2 concept is, should you see the data that you have access to, and should you be able to take action against that access? So a lot of enterprises will typically use some features in CloudHealth called FlexOrgs. I'll be drilling into those in a little bit later. But the goal is to follow best practices of least privilege. So that high level visibility is as much as we're willing to open up to customers. Really where I kind of hinted at where it gets interesting when you start thinking about mergers and acquisitions, especially if you go from a shared to a dedicated payer account model, where users have access to multiple AWS accounts versus being isolated into one single AWS account. So that's a journey that CloudHealth is really well positioned to help move organizations along through with a feature called FlexOrgs. This is our segmentation engine. It allows you to break up your costs based on account, subscription, project, and only give users access to those that they are responsible for. What's also really powerful with FlexOrgs is you can be given access to view access to all of the accounts. Maybe you have an organization that has a culture of visibility, and also you want to encourage other people to do good. If one team's doing well, you want to highlight that and say, hey, everybody, look at how great Team A is doing. They're really well optimized. FlexOrgs are well positioned to be able to give people that access to be able to see this, but then also make changes if they need to down the line.
Yeah, and that structure, of that FlexOrgs provides, we've actually adopted from a hub perspective, and we're currently implementing this because it's such a powerful and flexible tool, against the name, FlexOrgs, right? But this allows, again, that from an administrative perspective, that top view of the entire world. But maybe business line A or business line B, we only want to give them view and access into their assets and resources, even down to a single set of entities that make up an application, if you wanted to go down to that granularity of it. And then obviously bring in the cost information and then the event information that we talked about and some of the other solutions as well.
So you've created some FlexOrgs. Now let's see what that data looks like in CloudHealth. So we have dashboards. This is the next step past FlexOrgs. So you have the ability to create reports that are relative to that person's persona or that person's business unit. So maybe this is, we talked about finance versus the doers. Maybe somebody from the finance side, when they log in, they don't need to see how many EC2 instances that are running and how much storage you have. They care about cost. But if you're an engineer, you very much so care about how many EC2 instances you're responsible for, how much data is in S3. So this is where you can start to really tailor the experience of CloudHealth and what they see when they log in relative to that persona and what they care about. And most importantly, the other thing about CloudHealth is we don't need you to live in CloudHealth. We are really invested in being able to support CloudHealth data outside of CloudHealth. So you can get this data out through Save, Subscribe. You can also get access to this through APIs to be able to better put that data in the path of the engineer. Historically, people kind of viewed success of applications based on our users logging in, and that's really not what the goal is. The goal is to drive business outcomes. So dashboarding, although something that's really powerful for customers when they log in, it's also something a lot of our customers are using to pull data out and leveraging those default dashboards. The next challenge, chargeback and showback. Really, we obviously hinted at this in hearing from people, that journey from showback to chargeback potentially is really difficult. And so when I think about us at CloudHealth, we operate actually independently from a chargeback showback perspective from the rest of VMware. And we're going through that journey right now where VMware is really, really strict about showback and chargeback. And actually, business units are responsible for paying back, and if they go outside of their budget, they have to have these conversations. For us at CloudHealth, I'm looking at Sandeep over there, we are teetering on the showback line right now, where, yeah, you get an email, but it's if you break, is a PM or engineer gonna get yelled at? No. But as we mature and start to roll up more and more into the VMware cloud environment, we are going to have to move along that journey and move towards that.
I get yelled at a lot. Obviously I depend on weekly reports that come in, and we've started to carve these up. Now that we have the hub as kind of the core platform, all the cogs somehow roll on to me. And then I was like, wait a minute, wow, my expense really got high. And so then now we're breaking it down into individual services as we're bringing CloudHealth into the fold and into the hub. I'm like, well, Lucas, here's your cogs, and you're welcome. I'll take the check or credit card format.
And one of the ways that we've been able to do this, CloudHealth, born in the cloud, really strong focus on tagging. So there's really two ways you can think about tagging. You can tag at a resource level, so launch an EC2 instance, add a tag. There's also tagging at the account level. So all the resources within an account will be charged back to that one single tag. So, I mean, maybe for the group, people tagging their resources, yes. People tagging their accounts. So both, all right, good for you, easy crowd.
Should I go into my story of how not to do it? So I worked at a bank in a former life and went through a bunch of mergers. And one of the mergers, we go in to do our first run at their infrastructure, and they had named all of the resources like celestial bodies and random orbits. And I was like, well, what does Pluto do? And they're like, oh, the one guy in the corner is like, oh yeah, that's mine. I'm like, oh, it's yours. Wow, great. What's Pluto do? And they're like, oh, it's a database. And so we literally, before we could do anything, had to go in, tag everything, and then like with an actual job function, oh, this is a database server. It's no longer Pluto. And so those are the kind of things, when, especially when doing merger and acquisition, you know, tagging is so important. And the reverse side of that is what we're kind of going through right now with the with Broadcom's acquisition of VMware, is we're having to separate different business units and things, and honestly, the tagging is the only way. We're actually going through this right now, where we lived on this giant SaaS infrastructure for a lot of our SaaS solutions across different business lines, and so we're having to now decouple ourselves from those shared infrastructures. The only way we'd be able to do that is through proper tagging.
Yeah, and right there, yep. And then we also talked about delivering reports, and the really critical thing that CloudHealth is positioned to do is to be able to have resource owners take ownership of their resources. So being able to say, you know what, who is responsible for this instance? It has owner equals Chris on it. Being able to find that, go to that owner, be able to perform chargeback, be able to say, hey, you have a right-sizing opportunity for this. There's some savings to be able to have. And then how we do that in CloudHealth is, first, we start to identify those tags through our tag management feature. So this is about looking at your real estate across all your clouds and on-prem, saying, hey, you have this many unique tag keys, this many values, and really being able to help identify lesser used tags, as well as, most importantly, the more commonly used tags, to be able to create something called a perspective.
Yeah,
so,
and on that real quick, just to tie this back to the guardrails thing, you can create a policy in guardrails that's constantly monitoring the environments that you're overseeing. And if any asset goes in that doesn't have specific tags, or even, you know, one of the key pairs and those kind of things, it can take it offline. It can do a lot of the drift remediation pieces, or at least notifications, depending on how stiff you want to be from a policy enforcement perspective. But these are how we can start to tie in kind of the CloudHealth tagging engine with policy management to continue that optimization process.
Yeah, so exactly. So we've identified those tags, and now let's build some visibility around it. So now we talk about perspectives. This is the CloudHealth. This is what built CloudHealth. This is our bread and butter. This is our perspectives engine. So this is the way to group resources. Could be using things like tags. It doesn't have to be tags. It could be metadata on resources, names of resources. And this is being able to bring in that your business lens into your cloud costs to be able to group it relative to the view that you want to do. So it could be at an application level. It could be at a business unit level. I mentioned owner. These are the types of typical perspectives our customers will have to be able to look into those costs.
And we're adopting CloudHealth perspectives across the portfolio. So when a perspective is created, now we can do insights against the perspective. We can do drift remediation through guardrails through the perspective, as well as the cost information, and then also show that in a topology in the hub as kind of what you saw with the relationships and things like that. So again, you know, we're taking a lot of the goodness that CloudHealth brought to the table early on, and then molding that into how the new Tanzu portfolio is adapting these great capabilities.
So we've created those, we've looked at our tags, we've created these new views. Now let's look at those in reporting. So it's done through Flex reports. That is our next-gen future reporting strategy. And it is a SQL-based, so you don't have to write SQL, but you can write SQL against the data set, as well as drag and drop visualization of cloud and on-prem costs. What really becomes powerful with this is the partnership that our customers have with our account managers, our TAMs. Because this is an area that, I'm not saying the product has any gaps, it's perfect. But if it had one gap, this is an area where our smart customers and our smart customer success people are able to fill in those gaps with SQL, create these really unique unit economics-y type of reports that tie in business context to give you that visibility into how your business is doing. This is also available through the graph. All of our features, everything in CloudHealth is migrating towards this single GraphQL API, which is really powerful for our customers that are in this build and buy world. Historically, 5-6 years ago, it was build or buy. You would never buy CloudHealth and then hire a team of engineers to build on it. You'd say, why isn't CloudHealth good enough for me to not have to hire engineers? And what we've seen is a big shift in the industry where organizations are buying CloudHealth It gets them 80% of the way there, and then they can hire engineers and build this unbelievable platform on top of that, taking into account their innovation, and they can really deliver more value for much less and less overhead. And so the GraphQL API and our Flex Reports integration with that has been a big driver of enabling that. All right, and then the last challenge around managing commitment discounts. Reserved instances, savings plans, trying to cloud agnostic commitment discount term. So for this, there's really two main buckets. Centrally managed, where you'll have a team that purchases reserved instances, looks at your entire company's usage, and makes decisions based on that. And then you could have decentrally managed reserved instances, which in general, I would not suggest. What can happen is flow can happen, and an RI may be applied to an instance that you thought was being unused. And so really what we try to suggest our customers to do is centrally manage reserved instances and be able to have that conversation with engineers and with the finance team to be able to accurately forecast what usage will look like throughout the year and make reserved instance purchases to support that.
And I will say this, when we built the hub, we did not use reserved instances in the beginning, and obviously on the suggestion of my CloudHealth brethren, they're like, you should probably look into this, and we went in, they did some calculations for the optimization, and we saved almost 35% just by moving into reserved instance category. And now it's not, I was like, oh, this is another thing I'm gonna have to manage. It's not hard. I mean, we can honestly, through the predictive analytics, kind of figure out what our run rate is and just kind of go into the additional capacity or reduction of capacity that we need based on how kind of the business is operating and optimization stuff. So it's a powerful tool.
Where it does get hard is around amortization, the button click I just had. So now that you've purchased reserved instances, especially our savings plans, if you did an upfront amount, you now need to charge back that payment that you made on day one of the term of that RI to the people that use it. So that's an area that CloudHealth really shines, is being able to support amortization. And once you've made a purchase of reserved instances and savings plans, you can now see, all right, I know I bought those, but Chris used them. I want to charge him back for that. So being able to get that visibility of who utilized the reserved instance is a really critical step. The other step on this is not just purchasing, but it's now that you've purchased, how do you maintain? How do you keep that level of coverage? So CloudHealth also is able to look at your fleet and be able to say, hey, we know that this is going to be expiring in X number of days. So one of the things that we also try to help with our customers in moving along their cloud maturity journey is, how often do you buy RIs? We have customers asking us that. And it can be very specific to the type of company they are and their cyclical nature, but typically we try to push companies to purchase RIs monthly, to be looking at this on a monthly basis. Some companies are doing this weekly. I've even heard of companies doing this every day. They have a reserved instance nerd that logs in every day, every morning, and says, what RIs do we need to buy and exchange today? And so that is a really interesting journey that we see companies moving along with the goal. We really want companies to start doing this at a monthly basis. And how do you do that? So we have a feature in CloudHealth, recommendations for reservable services. So right now it's currently in beta, so it's in beta. But right now we support AWS for EC2, RDS, and then Redshift, DynamoDB, Elasticache, and OpenSearch. So these are all services that CloudHealth will look at your usage and be able to make a recommendation, say you'll be able to save X amount if you purchase this much, your coverage will get to Y%. We also have our amortized cost reports. So this is that chargeback use case. I bought reserved instances, but Chris used them. He needs to be charged back for that. They shouldn't go back to me. So we have the reports to be able to support where those reserved instances floated out to, not just who actually purchased those. And then lastly, this is a feature. So we talked about how often do you manage RIs. This is a automation feature that's called Savings Automator that actually allows you to say, here, CloudHealth, here's this much money to go play with, maintain this level of coverage, go to town, I want to go write code. And CloudHealth will manage the reserved instances and be able to make the exchanges with convertible RIs to maintain the coverage level that you want, and you can take the hands off the wheel. There's some Oh, I can't say that. Never mind. Under NDA. Yeah, so really, really big opportunity here in the next 6 months as well as the industry continues to change. Savings Automator is really well positioned to mature with the market with those changes.
Yeah, and I can say, we are utilizing this in our own practice, right? And so I think a lot of what the capabilities that you guys are building into this are a direct response of like my poor practice from a development perspective, and now kind of tightening up our own belts through obviously the use of CloudHealth and the estimators and what we can do with reserved instances and things like that.
Yep. And then lastly, quick shout out to the FinOps Foundation. If you're interested in downloading and reading the book, you have a free copy through here. Any people heard of the FinOps Foundation? Yes, maybe a little bit. Great, love to hear it. So this is an organization CloudHealth has been really all in on since they opened up. We were the first premier member of the FinOps Foundation. And the thing that I think is so powerful about it is it's not about the information, but it's the community that it's built. FinOps is a new thing. You're trying to get, if you're the first FinOps person at your company, you're trying to get people to one, know what that word is, and two, care. And that can be really hard to get people to now care about a new department, a new bottom line initiative. And so the FinOps Foundation, being a part of that, that's what everybody is there trying to do, is build a community, find champions. So there's a lot of opportunity to learn from people that are facing the same challenges as you are, trying to get people to care about cost, getting engineers to care.
Yeah. And one slide that we don't have in here too is if you're interested in the hub and the whole intelligence services portfolio and anything caught your eye, you can get a free tier of Tanzu Hub that includes insights, some costs, kind of some teaser functionality. We're bringing in more of the CloudHealth capabilities into the hub, which eventually it'll live there 100%. And so you can start to look at your entire environment, start to understand how the relationships are, start to see how we decorate those things, show you application topology, bring in the cost factors, the event aggregation, guardrails piece. You can utilize that as well and test this out and start to see the power of what you can do when you have that visibility across a multi-cloud landscape through the portfolio. So I don't have a slide, but if what is the restaurant that we have?
Canaletto?
Canaletto. We have that restaurant all day. They're going to have some demo booths. You can see some of this stuff in action. I encourage you to come and, if anything, have a drink and some food and see some cool stuff.
Yeah, and that's it. Thank you all for coming.